Owing money in America is not a crime. Debtors' prisons were abolished here in the 19th century. And yet these days, people are routinely being thrown into prison for failing to pay their debts. And some people seem to be on board.
You know, you talk about debtors' prisons. We used to have debtors' prisons. Now, bankruptcy is no taint. Bankruptcy is an exit strategy. Our society and our culture has changed. We need to get back to the opportunity.
Now, enforcement varies from state to state, from county to county, and there are no national statistics on how many people are locked up for this reason, which makes you think that something's a little fishy. The debt collectors might be using law enforcement as their own tool. But during a recession, what does that really mean when poverty becomes criminalized? Well, earlier I caught up with Deborah Popolowski, who was thrown into jail over a $250 credit debt. So I first asked her if she could have ever imagined that happening over that amount of money.
No, of course not. I mean, I'd always heard there was no debtor's prison. I thought it was impossible to go to jail for money that you owed.
Yeah, well, I mean, debtor's prison is something that was abolished in this country back in the 19th century. You know, you actually ended up spending 25 hours there in jail. What was that like?
Oh, it was miserable. It was, I mean, I couldn't believe I was going there in the first place when the officer picked me up. I kept trying to tell him that that I didn't have a crime, it was a civil warrant, and he took me in anyway. And I was just in the jail with, I mean, they processed me, they took fingerprints, I had to take off my street clothes and put on an orange jumpsuit, and, you know, and then I was in little locked rooms with cameras with regular jail population. Some women on their way to prison and some women on their way to court. There was a woman in there who was telling a story to some of the other women that about killing an old lady, and I mean, it freaked me out. It was strange.
Yeah, did you feel like you belonged in this cell with those other people?
No, I mean, I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't even been informed about the court hearing where he won a judgment against me. The man who had bought this debt had apparently 2 different court hearings, and he'd said that he'd served me paperwork for it, but he never had. I'd never been served. So this whole thing happened without my knowledge. By the time I found anything about it, there was a warrant out, and I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. I mean, it was a civil warrant, and I kept asking people what that was and what I was supposed to do about it, and apparently no one knew. So I was in the process of trying to solve it, to go back to court or to do something about it, and then I got, the police officer ran my plate at a stop. I was at a parking meter and just took me in, so.
You know, I mean, a lot of people, I think, aside from the initial shock that somebody actually went to debtor's prison, as you could call it, would say, why don't you just pay the $250 fine if you were informed that there was a warrant issued for you, that you owed this money? Why didn't you just pay it? Is it because you were unable to?
At that point, it wasn't even $250. The original debt was $250, but he had, I think, quadrupled it. I think it was $1,311 by the time he'd added some kind of fees or done some other things to it. I don't know exactly if that's, you can do that. So I didn't have, you know, $1,300 to pay it. And I didn't even know who this guy was. I didn't want to just hand over money to someone. I mean, he hadn't identified the debt. He hadn't proved the debt to me. I've had incidences of credit theft, of identity theft. And so I didn't know where this man was coming from with this. If I'd been informed and been to court, maybe I would have had a chance to figure it out, but I didn't.
Now, you know, this is something that, you know, what I find shocking is that there are no national statistics for the amount of people that go through the exact same experience as what you had. So, you know, what do you make of the secrecy behind all these actions?
Well, I don't think the credit industry wants people to know that this is possible, because it's not right. I mean, they shouldn't be able to use the system to do their work for them, to collect the debts. Because basically what they were telling me is that if I wanted to get out of jail that night, my bail was his money. You know, it didn't go to the court system. It didn't go to the state or the county. It went to this collection agency. So basically, they were his employees, and that can't be right. That kind of loophole is just wrong.
And you know, this is a time when clearly we're going through a recession. A lot of people are in financial trouble right now in the country. Do you know anyone else that has had a similar experience, or are you worried that we're going to start seeing more and more of these stories?
Yeah, it does worry me. I mean, it really does, because people are, especially people who don't have enough income to be able to pay legal fees or to go through that kind of channel, are really vulnerable to this. You lose your job, and there it goes. If people can start attacking you, putting you in jail, you can lose your job, or it's very scary, the thought that someone can do this over a little bit of money.
All right, Deborah, I want to thank you very much for joining us and telling us your story. And this is, in fact, something that's happening where people, owing money is becoming a crime in America. Thank you.
Thank you.